Okay, so here we are on part 2 of making my RGB Christmas sign. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking cheap spray paint, just a cheap dollar spray paint, and I'm spraying it into the holes of the sign, because the theory here was that when I brush on the oil-based paint, that the paint wouldn't have gotten into the holes, and I was just trying to cover up all exposed wood to make sure I don't have any exposed plywood, nothing that would soak up with water. And then after I did that, I painted the sign. So I'm not an expert on woodworking or painting, but like I said, I think I watched enough old 64 goat videos to get on by, and I knew to use an oil-based paint. So this is just regular black oil-based paint, and it probably would have been better to roll it, but I was just trying to be cheap, so I got a cheap brush and I brushed it on. And once the sign was all painted and dried, it was time to install LEDs. So as you can see right there, I was looking at which way to install the LEDs for the sequencing, what I thought would look the best. And as you can see here, I'm struggling a bit to get the LED in the hole. Now the LEDs are 12 millimeter, and I drilled the holes out exactly 12 millimeter. But the reason that this ended up being a much bigger problem than what I anticipated is the fact that in reality these LEDs are not made into plywood. And if you want to do this project, I would recommend not using plywood. And I'll elaborate on that a little further. But right now I wanted to test the LEDs to see if they worked or how they looked in the sign. So I'm just hooking up that Arduino that I was using, and as you can see right there, I got the LEDs to work, so I knew that the project was working. So just to skip around a bit, because it was really frustrating pushing those LEDs into the sign, I wanted to go ahead and start soldering up a couple of joints just to do something different than installing all the LEDs. So this is how I'm going to solder up all my joints. And I know I'm going to get crap from a lot of people for this, but this is how I pretty much do all my solder joints, and I never had a solder joint come apart. So I just pre-tin both sides of the wire, and I put them together. I don't twist them together at all. I just touch them together and then heat up the solder and let the solder flow between the two wires. Now a lot of people will criticize that because there's no stress relief on that. The actual is the solder. The wires aren't hooked around each other or anything. But me personally, I've never had an issue with soldering up the joints like that. There's two reasons why I wanted to do it like that. First reason is it's a lot easier to get a heat shrink on when the joints are in line and you're not twisting them together. Now on the power cables, when you cut off the connector, you have the two loose power cables that were loose to begin with, and then you have the connector that you cut off. So I did twist them together to get better, to have two wires instead of one for the positive and ground. But this one's the data one, so as you can see, it's just one. And as you can see, I just tin them and put them together. But the reason I do it like this is for any reason if the sign rots in the future and I need to take the LEDs off, all I had to do is I can just slice the heat shrink a little bit, put my soldering iron back on the joint, and the wires will separate without any problem. Now I am adding dielectric grease to all the joints. That's what I just put on there before I heat shrink them, just to add a little corrosion resistance to the joints. But yeah, that's how I plan on doing all my joints. So then after I got done doing that, I continued on with installing the LEDs. And as you can see, I have some time-lapse video of just going through installing LEDs. And like I was saying before, in hindsight, I would not use plywood to do this project. Now there's one other guy. There's really not a lot of people, even though on eBay, when you buy these LEDs, they actually show that this is the purpose of the LEDs, to drill a hole and install them like this to make signs. That's the example they use on eBay. Really, when I've been browsing around on YouTube, not a lot of people have done this, actually used LEDs to make signs like this. But there is one other guy, and he has a little business going on where he does that. And he laser cuts a board, and he makes a kit where he sends you the board and the LEDs. And the laser cut board, he was calling it Coro. So I kind of Google searched that, and what I think he's using, and what I probably should have used, is and you can get it at Lowe's or Home Depot, is corrugated plastic board. That not only is that waterproof, and there's a lot of like vinyl printed signs that are usually corrugated plastic. Not only is it waterproof, but it's the right thickness. You see, the problem is that these LEDs are not designed for the thickness of the plywood. The actual like back out hooks, back out tabs on the LED, the way they're designed for a much thinner piece of material and not as thick as this plywood. So the LEDs didn't really fit in the holes too well. But it could have been worse. It could have been that the holes are too big and the LEDs were too loose in the holes. That's definitely not a problem. The problem is the LEDs are too tight in the holes. And they don't really grab too well into the holes. So, you know, at first I was trying to be gentle with using my hand, but so I wouldn't damage the LED, but it was just so difficult that the method I ended up using or implementing was using channel locks and just holding the LED with a channel lock and just twisting it side to side. And this part of the project ended up being the part of the project that I did not anticipate to take so long. Okay, I'm hoping that that is the worst part of the project, was sticking in all those LEDs. But I wanted to film this part of the video live to explain a problem that, as I was doing Lord, the very last word, a problem I realized that I did, and that was the direction of the data of the LEDs, which if I decide to do sequential animation, it's gonna be noticeable. Basically, because my very first letter, I started here, and I was working on the inside of the capital letter. When I did the lowercase letters, I ended up running the lowercase letters in the opposite direction. So the outside of the capital letters going down is the data flow, and on the lowercase letters, it's going up on the backside as the data flow. And somehow I managed on the C had the data flow going down, and then when I went to the lowercase letters, I did the opposite. The backside went up. And then today I went to do Lord, and I went to do the L, and I guess I checked the capital letters and I had the data going down on the L, and then when I went to figure out the lowercase letters, that's when a light bulb went off in my head and was like, hold on, wait a minute, I had the lowercase letters going the opposite way. So I just went ahead and did the lowercase letters up, so then that way the whole sign is consistent. You know, ideally I would pull all the uppercase letters out and run the data, run the chain the opposite way. Well, that's kind of too much work, and I don't know, once the holes are walled out, I don't know if the LEDs will hold good. Plus, we're getting toward the ends of October already, and I still have a lot more to do. I got to put together the control box and all the electronics. So I'm just going to press on forward with the project without changing the way the LEDs are plugged in. So this is the back side of the sign. And I'm gonna go, I'll get a really small, I had to chip away some paint, so once I get everything running, I'm gonna get a small brush and just put oil-based paint on the exposed wood. But I'm gonna wait till I get everything running. And then I think in this video I'm gonna explain why not to use plywood. If you wanna do this project, don't use plywood, and I think I probably already explained that part of the video, probably during the time lapse. So this is as far as I am, and the good news is that you can read it. It reads real easily, so at least people will know what it says. So thanks for watching.